Assalamu alaikum students and welcome to MLS Online Virtual Classroom. Today is lesson number 7, which is covering page 20 of Oxford Discover 6. So let's dive in. Students, the very first thing we're going to do is to understand. And what to understand? Understanding is the comprehension of the previous lesson. Now, as you all know that we have read and we have heard the text as the explanatory text in the previous lesson, and we are now we are now Assalamu alaikum students and welcome to MLS Online Virtual Classroom. Today is lesson number 7, which is going to cover page 20 of Oxford Discover 6. So let's dive in. Students, the very first thing we're going to do is to understand. Now, what to understand? Understanding means comprehension, and comprehension of the previous lesson. What was the previous lesson about? We read and we heard the reader say about the explanatory text, which was overcoming Earth's obstacle. Now, if you have understood the whole text, you must be able to answer this question. It says to think, to ponder, to make your brains work on this question. What the question is, what surprised you in overcoming Earth's obstacle? The very first question in the statement. And then it says, would you like to design bridges or tunnels? Why or why not? So it has three parts. The first being this part. What surprised you in the text? Overcoming Earth's obstacle. Then it says, would you like to design bridges or tunnels? Then it says, why or why not? Which means if you're going for the bridge, why a bridge? Why not a tunnel? And if you're going for the tunnel, why a tunnel? Why not a bridge? So I have written a sample answer, but I really encourage you guys to write from your own. Write what you think surprised you, what you think you would be able to design or you want to design, and why, the reason of you choosing that one. So let's see what I have written. Alright, the thing which surprised me is that how Earth's terrain means the landscape, but by landscape we means the form the Earth's surface take, which means we have mountains, we have rivers, we have valleys, we have gorges, we have deserts, we have seas and oceans, and then we have glaciers and whatnot. So it's different. It's not the same all over the earth, right? The whole globe is not the same. It's not plain. It is varied. It has many types. So the thing which surprised me is that how Earth's terrain can pose different kind of obstacles for humans, and how blessed are human beings to be able to overcome each and every of them in a very fashioned or disciplined fashion. So what I mean to say by this is that I'm surprised at how the earth has been laid, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has different aspects of the earth's surface, given to us, and how we can benefit from each other, how the atmosphere is different, how the levels of each of those is different, how high the mountains are, how low the sea is, how harsh the desert is. So I was really surprised at that, and how we are being blessed and we are given the gift to overcome each of them obstacles. If we want to cross a mountain, we can easily design something that we can cross. If we want to cross a river, we can easily design. We are capable of designing something like a bridge, a tunnel, anything that we can cross them. The second thing is, I would like to design bridges. The answer to this part, why? Because the reason why I would want to design a bridge is because with bridges we can experiment and put to test new ideas, shapes and materials in making innovative and effective bridges. That's correct. So students, the reason why I would want to design a bridge instead of a tunnel, because a tunnel has the same shape, same circular shape all over, no matter what we use, how we use it, but it will be the same shape all over it. but with bridges we can design bridges from any kind of material that we want, right? In past we used stone, then we used iron and steel. Now we're using asphalt bridges with suspension cables. We had beam bridges, arch bridges, suspension cables, then we have cantilever bridges. So we can experiment with materials, ideas and shapes, and bring and make them even more innovative, which means creative and effective as well. We can cut down the cost, we can make it longer, we can make it shorter, the way we want. So I personally would really want to design a bridge. Alright, that was my answer. You can write your own as well. Moving on. The second part says, make a mind map of the text, which I also required you in the previous lesson to make in your rough papers, and discuss it with your partner. Talk about similarities and differences between your mind maps. Now what you can do is you can make your own mind map of that text and then compare it with mine. I have made a sample one. Let's check it out. So the very main idea of my mind map is the very topic of this chapter or lesson, overcoming Earth's obstacle. Then I have linked the related ideas. The very first is, why do we have obstacles? Because the Earth has a varied terrain. Varied means, you have learned this, which means a variety. It's not the same all over, it has many kinds of terrain. And what are those? Let's see. Rivers, gorges, mountains and valleys, just to name a few. It can have even more than that. And when we have a varied terrain, we have obstacles, and when we have obstacles, we want to overcome them. So how do we overcome them? The very first thing is we build a bridge. Bridge is a very ancient kind of overcoming technique. And how many types of them? There are types. And how many have we learned? 3 types basically: a suspension bridge, an arch bridge and a beam bridge. The beam bridge being a very basic and plain one. The arch bridge we used in the ancient times, and nowadays we use the suspension bridge. Suspension bridge has the quality of being light, being strong and be able to traverse long distances. So we can have this kind of bridge for long distances. Alright. Then we have advantages and disadvantages, which means pros and cons of making a bridge. What are those? Let's see. Okay, so a bridge is basically a very cheap method to overcome any obstacle because it does not take much money compared to a tunnel. Then it is easy. Yes, students, it is always easier to make a bridge than making a tunnel, because making a bridge you have to erect some pillars or beams and lay your bridge on it, or you can have towers and suspension cables and use the you make the bridge, and it's efficient as well. How is it efficient? Because you can cut down on cost, you can make it longer and shorter, you can have it, you can try for many cost effective materials, you can have it any kind that you want, and you can have it for passengers, we can have it for cargo or freight, you can have it for water even as aqueducts. But it has some disadvantages as well. What are those? One of the very huge disadvantages that it is prone to weather effects. And what are weather effects? We're going to learn this in the lesson, in the same lesson later on. Then the second type of overcoming Earth's obstacle we have is to make a tunnel. Now tunnels have few characteristics. Let's discuss. It's time taking. Yes, students, it's always taking a very huge time, a very long span of time to make a tunnel. Then it's expensive because we have to either dig through mountains, which is rock, either we have to dig through the seabed underwater, which is also requiring a huge amount of money. Then we have to employ huge labor force and machinery like the tunnel borer, and it's also used on either fuel or electricity, which is also very expensive. Apart from that, it's really difficult to make. Why is it difficult? Because sometimes it's challenging to cut through a rock, you know, because the rock has many types. It can be a hard rock. Then if we want to make it an underwater, we have the challenge of the water, its weight, then how deep we have to go to overcome that, and how far can we go. And it is always a huge challenge to make both ends of the tunnel meet in the middle. The next is, this is basically an advantage of it. It's not prone to weather effects. What's the meaning of prone? It is not vulnerable. It is not at the risk of weather effects, which means weather does not affect the tunnels very easily. And then we have a very big advantage in the shape of, it can carry huge weights. It can carry heavy weight, which means you can transport as a large amount of weight that you want, be it hundreds of thousands of tons of coal or any transport material that you want to. Alright, so now we have some question answers from the passage that we just read in the very last lesson, and here are some of them. What are the three factors that engineers consider before building a bridge or tunnel? So what are those factors, students? Here are the three factors. The three factors that engineers consider before building a bridge or tunnel are: the distance to be traversed. Traverse means to be traveled. The composition of soil at site, and what needs to be transported across or through. Across is for bridges or through is for tunnels. So what this means is, basically, if an engineer has to decide whether I should build a bridge or a tunnel, he looks for, or she looks for, these three factors. How long do we have to travel, which means how wide is the obstacle, right? And what's the composition of the soil? Is it a sandy soil? Is it a rocky soil or a rocky bed? Is it a clayey one? How how slippery or how firm it is? Do we have do we have uh, do we have a firm soil, or do we have a very, runny one? So this is also the composition. And what needs to be transported, which means, do we have to transport passengers across that bridge or tunnel, or do we have to transport um, huge tons or large heavy weight machinery, or heavy weight construction material, or something from the mines like raw materials like coal, or do we have to transport steel or bricks, be it anything. So that's also kept in mind.